We hope this chapter is one of reconciliation and progress, not another chronicle of tears and bloodshed.
Hailed as a historic opportunity that cannot be wasted, Afghanistan's government meets the Taliban for the first time to negotiate an end to 19 years of war. But can they overcome persistent violence and contesting ideologies to offer any hope of peace? Welcome to the program. I am Hashim Ahalbarra in Doha, where a diplomatic effort to end decades of war in Afghanistan is underway. For the first time, the Afghan government and the Taliban have met in the same room. It's an achievement that follows dozens of rounds of talks, prisoner exchanges, and a ceasefire against US forces. Negotiators from the highest level will sit face to face in Doha to find a way to end nearly 20 years of conflict. Among the main challenges ahead are the establishment of a mutual and long-lasting ceasefire and the integration of the Taliban into the government of Afghanistan.
We want all the people of Afghanistan to be reunited under one roof again, after more than 42 years of upheavals, aggressions, jihad, and resistance. Although narratives might differ, we all know what happened to us throughout these years and where we stand today. We now need to grasp this unique opportunity to move towards a new future that we can define together.
We have acted accordingly to all the points outlined in the previous agreement, and we are requesting the other side to act accordingly to those things that have been agreed to, so we can have this process without any problems. We want Afghanistan to be an independent, developed country, and it should have a form of Islamic system where all its citizens see themselves reflected.
Our correspondent Osama bin Javid is at the talks.
For all of the relevant sides in the Afghan conflict, this was a historic moment, as many of their leaders put it. The Afghan side saying that we need to learn to agree to disagree. The US Secretary of State saying that the Afghans will not be left alone, and the Afghan Taliban saying that they are willing to negotiate and they are willing to learn and move forward from what is a new Afghanistan. So it is a momentous occasion which has brought all of these sides together for the first time without their foreign backers or interlocutors, where Afghans will be facing off with Afghans and resolving difficult issues such as the status of security forces versus Taliban fighters, the constitution in Afghanistan, figuring out whether it's going to be an emirate or a republic, are all issues which are going to be difficult, to say the least. But both sides are adamant that they are going to solve these differences. They are adamant that they are going to continue to talk and make sure that they realize that only talks and talking to each other and sitting on the negotiating table and compromise is the way forward, and there is no military solution. So this is the first day of these talks. If the road to achieve here was bumpy, the coming to an agreement is going to be even more difficult, and that is something that all sides agree. The Americans saying that yes, it is up to the Afghans to decide, but they are not going to leave them alone. If they want, they can come back and facilitate the negotiations as well. But Afghans, both here in the Qatari capital Doha and in Kabul, are hopeful, with a cautious hope that this could lead towards lasting peace in Afghanistan. For Inside Story, Osama bin Javid, Al Jazeera.
Hey, some more about who's leading these talks. Abdullah Abdullah is in charge of the Afghan government's delegation. He's a former foreign minister and presidential candidate. Representing the Taliban is his deputy chief, Mullah Abdul Ghani Barada. He is also a Taliban co-founder. And special envoy Zalmay Khalilzad leads the US negotiators. Born in Afghanistan, he served as US ambassador under Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama. Let's bring in our guests from Kabul, Mushtaq Rahim, founding member of the Afghanistan Affairs Unit, a think tank. former member of the High Peace Council. Here in Doha is Sultan Barakat, founding director of the Center for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies. In Washington, D.C. is Omar Samad, former Afghan ambassador to France and Canada, now a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Thank you all for joining us. Mushtaq, who would have thought that after all these years, the two arch rivals, the Taliban and the Afghan government, would sit together and negotiate a peace settlement? Isn't this a major development?
Absolutely. This is a watershed event. As your reporter also said, it is being termed as an historic event. This is happening for the first time in over 4 decades of conflict in Afghanistan, where the conflict parties are sitting across the table to each other. If you go back into the history, during the late 80s, there was negotiations, Geneva process that was called. Even there, the Afghan parties didn't face each other on the negotiation table. It was among other actors facilitating from outset. Here, sitting under one single roof, talking about the issues, talking to the media that is either pro-Taliban or that has been operating from Kabul. And they're talking to them and answering the questions. I think it's a huge forward stride in terms of achieving peace in Afghanistan. But let's not get diluted by this progress. The next step is the absolute difficult one, crucial one, and could decide the fate of this conflict. So yes, there is a lot of hope attached to it. It is termed a significant move forward with a lot of cautious optimism.
Sultan, if you remember a few years ago, the Taliban battered on the run. They were determined that they were the only legitimate authority in Afghanistan, saying repeatedly there's absolutely no way they would meet with a puppet government. This is the term that they have been using for many years to describe the political establishment in Kabul. Now, they made a massive concession and they're sitting together with that government. Is that on its own a significant achievement?
Of course it is, but if you take it from the point of view of the Taliban, their greater objective, and that is to get the United States to withdraw its troops from Afghanistan, has already been achieved as far as they're concerned. The 29th of February agreement has committed the United States to scale down its troops and ultimately to withdraw. So for them, they see that victory is already there. Now they're moving into a second phase. This second phase, which is also an integral part of their agreement with the United States, is about reaching a common understanding with the rest of the Afghans as to the future of the country. And this is very important, even in order to allow the agreement that they've struck with the United States to be implemented. They can't go any further without making sure that there is a government that is sovereign, acceptable by all, and a government to which the United States will hand over the military bases and on the basis and start a new set of relationship.
Before we continue, this is some of what the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said before the talks began.
Each of you, I hope you will look inside your hearts. Each of you carry a great responsibility. But know that you're not alone. The entire world wants you to succeed and is counting on you succeeding.
Omar, what do you think will be the issue which is going to top the agenda between the Taliban and the Afghan government in the coming days and weeks?
Well, there are a lot of issues, of course, and both sides are coming to this with their minds set on what the agenda should look like. And it's sort of a roadmap that needs to be figured out by both sides. And they have already established 2 small committees, 5 members each, to look into this issue just in the past hour or 2. And to see how the agenda can be shaped and whether they will agree on the items on the agenda and on prioritizing them or organizing in any way that is possible and agreeable to both sides. Now, the Taliban, we do know, have a lot of issues to talk about. And I think they are very well organized. Looking back at how they dealt with the Americans, there's a lot of experience there. And they would like to see things sequenced in a certain way. Kabul obviously has been focused quite a bit on how to reduce violence, and their preference is to have a permanent ceasefire announced as soon as possible. We do not know if the Taliban are going to agree to that, or they're going to condition that on some other issues that have to be dealt with, including maybe how to deal with the fact that Afghanistan needs a transition. So I think that the next few hours and the next few days are going to be critical in terms of setting the agenda and the path for the negotiations to take place.
Mushtaq, we spoke earlier about those who are representing both delegations, Abdullah on behalf of the Afghan government and Abdul Ghani Baradar on behalf of the Taliban. However, there's been some major reshuffle over the past few days about the makeup of the Taliban delegation, with Mawlawi Abdul Hakim Haqqani now a chief negotiator. Is this an indication that the Taliban are sending its toughest people to the talks in Doha to ensure there is absolutely no concession in the near future?
Well, one can see it from that perspective that they don't want to give any concession, but my reading is different. I believe some of the Taliban bigwigs were not very much happy with the way things were being taken forward with the Americans. And there was a worry attached to this process that we may see a breakup among the Taliban ranks. In order to avoid that, and in order to make sure that the hardliners have a say in the decision making and remain on the top of the table, they are putting forward so that avoid any sort of a situation where a decision is made on a negotiation table and then that is not backed by certain individuals or certain groups within the Taliban ranks. So they are trying to make sure that those who have more of a hardliner sort of stance, they make the decision so that which will be easier to be implemented with those which are not that strong in their stance as far as anti-government or anti-American rhetoric is concerned.
Sultan, it was quite interesting that both Mike Pompeo and Abdullah spoke about the need for a lasting ceasefire to be implemented. But do you think that this is something that could be possible given the fact that the Taliban may not be willing to commit themselves to a massive concession before they can see that some of their calls have been reciprocated?
I think it's possible. I think again, if we go back to the original agreement between the United States and the Taliban, it did refer to a ceasefire as being one of the main elements to be discussed in the first intra-Afghan meeting. So although the agenda is left to the Afghans to work out, there are some subheadings that have already been agreed, and ceasefire, reduction of violence is one of those. Taliban has been reluctant to enter into long ceasefires over the last 2 years, but they have accepted 3 short ceasefires coinciding with Eid Fitr and then Eid al-Adha, and also they have accepted or introduced a new term of reduction of violence, which has extended for some time. However, I think now as the talks start, there is pressure from both sides to try and increase the heat on the other in order to get a greater degree of concessions from the other side. So we are hearing that the Taliban are trying to advance in Panjshir area in the north, and also that some external countries are supporting locals to arm against the Taliban. So all of these issues, I think, will be part of this discussion as we go forward. And I suspect, as Abdullah has called for, ceasefire is really the most important aspect for the majority of the Afghans on the ground. They've now lived 40 years plus in violence. And for these talks to be meaningful, some kind of serious reduction in violence will be required.
Omar, from Al-Mullah Omar all the way to Haybatullah Akhundzada, who is the current leader of the Taliban, the central piece of their narrative was basically the Islamic Emirate based on Sharia law. This has been their raison d'etre. Do you think that they will be able to make any concession about this and join talks about incorporating Sharia law with Western principle of democracy to be able to bridge the gap with the government in Kabul?
I think that for most Afghans, going back to the 90s, they have this notion of what the emirate stands for, and most are uncomfortable with that. I am not quite sure if the Taliban will stick to a label. They prefer, I think, to work with the system. I think that they will focus on what kind of an Islamic system will or can emerge as part of the talks that take place. Remember that Afghanistan doesn't need anything that is too alien to its people, whether it's the Western concept of a system that doesn't work very well, or whether it's an Islamic or extreme version of an interpretation of a system that also is probably not so welcomed by most Afghans. So what we need to do is create the bigger tent that can accommodate all the different persuasions that exist in this multi-ethnic, multi-cultural society that Afghanistan is. And we need to make sure that there's a balance between rural and urban, between genders, between the ethnic groups, minorities, and all. So to come to an agreement on that would require very thoughtful deliberation in discussions going forward between people who really know what it is about. It shouldn't be about power struggle. It shouldn't be about control over territories, even though that is an important aspect of what will emerge later on. So how we build a system, I think, is what the Taliban and hopefully the other side, the Islamic State side, which is larger than just the government in Kabul right now, they have to come to terms on that.
Okay. Stay with us. I want to look at the US-Taliban agreement signed in February, which paved the way for these talks. It gave US and NATO forces 14 months to leave Afghanistan. The Pentagon plans to have fewer than 5,000 troops and personnel remaining by the end of November. In return, the Taliban committed to preventing other groups, including Al-Qaeda, from using Afghanistan as a base to threaten the US and its allies. And the Afghan government has freed nearly 5,000 Taliban prisoners and agreed in August to release more. Mushtaq, one of the issues that people are not talking about, I think, is going to be a major issue, which is the ethnic divide in the country. And, particularly the Pashto-Tajik thing, to the point where the government itself, based in Kabul, has suffered from this divide for many, many years. Would it be possible to turn that chapter, have the Taliban and all the components of the ethnic divide move forward?
You see, Afghanistan has been through conflict, and that conflict has inflicted so many damages on the society. It's not only ethnic divide. There is a divide within the ethnicity and sub-ethnic groups. There is a divide of ideological divide among the different groups that we have. Omar Samad talked about urban and rural divide that we have. There are so many divides in this country, and most of them are inflicted by the long and protracted conflict. Now, going forward, Afghanistan is in certain need of a very strong post-conflict peace-building agenda that should be topped by the discussion of nation building. Right now, if you see 2 decades long, even Bonn Conference, that was post-Taliban time, post-9/11 agreement on the current state system, that meeting was ended based on ethnocentric divide of the power among different groups. Since then, we have had power sharing based on ethnicity. That's going to be a major problem in future as well, Taliban or no Taliban. In any case, Afghanistan is in need of a strong nation-building agenda where ideologies, where vision for future should supersede, should exceed this short-sighted ethnocentric attitude towards politics and state management.
Sultan, where do the regional players stand here? We're talking about Russia, India, Pakistan, and Iran, which have major stakes in Afghanistan.
Well, they're all, of course, are very important to achieve sustainable peace in Afghanistan. And some have already declared a position that is very much anti-institution of the Islamic Emirate. And that, in a sense, have drawn the line. And this is, I suspect, why Mullah Baradar today did not refer to reinstitute the emirate that was unseated back in 2001, but he simply referred to a system that is based on Islamic principles. Now, I think that actually will not find a lot of resistance in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is already the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, and Islam is an important cornerstone of the makeup of the country. It is about how you structure the state, and to what extent Islam is utilized in the civil affairs and in the politics of the state of Afghanistan. I think most of the neighboring countries are in support of peaceful Afghanistan, and they have come out today in the opening ceremony loud and clear. Almost all, with the exception now, unfortunately, Iran was on the agenda, but for some reason the link did not, there was no speech by the foreign minister. But every other country has spoken, and they are supporting this process. Peace in Afghanistan cannot happen without the regional countries. Afghanistan and the conflict in Afghanistan was not caused entirely locally and was not maintained by a local momentum. It is there's a lot of proxies at work here. There are a lot of funding from outside, intervention, and a couple of regional powers are now playing a Cold War in Afghanistan, as was the situation between the United States and the Soviet Union in the 1980s.
Omar, Pakistan plays a crucial role in the region, and it has been closely monitoring the situation in the country. Do you think that they will be willing to move forward with an outcome that would see the Taliban, for example, form a national unity government along with the political establishment based in Kabul?
Well, Pakistan is an important player. It has, according to the Americans, played a constructive role so far. According to some Afghans, they are very skeptical about what Pakistan's intentions still are, going back to the 90s and in the last 10 years or so. But I think that we have reached a point. I think that Pakistan also, like everybody else, has learned a lot of lessons from the Afghan conflict. I'm hoping that they will have a new paradigm shift that focuses on making sure that Afghans can come together, that they can forge something that is Afghan-owned and Afghan-led, and that stability in Afghanistan will be of consequence, positive consequence across the region, including for Pakistan. So we are hoping that they will continue to play a constructive role, but Afghans at the same time have to make sure that they play a role in the region that balances all the interests and does not create a void for proxy warfare to take over again.
Gentlemen, I have 1 minute, and I would appreciate 15-second answer from each of you. Would you see Akhundzada along with the government in Kabul meeting together in the near future, announcing a national unity government? Mushtaq first.
It's going to be a difficult path ahead. It is going to be a difficult process, but there is a lot of optimism attached to it. Unity government, maybe transitional government, probably interim government, some sort of arrangement should be part of the deal.
Sultan?
I think the existing government will resist any form of interim government to come in. And that is natural. I think it's probably too early to talk about an interim government. There are many other greater value aspects or issues that need to be addressed before we go into the detail of what kind of governance is required.
Omar?
Well, I think that eventually we need a transition. How it's shaped is going to depend on how these discussions go and who plays a constructive role, who plays a spoiler's role. At the end of the day, I think compromise and flexibility are going to be very important from all sides.
Thank you. Let's see what happens in the coming days and weeks. A definitely crucial moment for a country that has been beset by war, divisions, bloodshed and instability. Mushtaq Rahim, Sultan Barakat. Omar Samad, I really appreciate your contribution and your insight. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hashim Ahl Barra, and the entire team here in Doha. Bye for now.